What's going on, everybody? This is Al from playbookgamer.com, and today I am creating my first ever season recap video. This was an idea I got from somebody a couple of days ago, and I thought it was a really good one. It's just an overview of the season, what went on, not only with us, but with everybody else around the country. We're going to look at a lot of things. We're going to look at our schedule. We're going to look at end of the season polls, and then you got all American list, all conference lists, all of the awards. We're going to look at our player ratings, who progressed over the course of the season. We're going to look at stats galore, anything and everything. We're going to look at it, and I may forget to leave something else, as this is my first time creating a video like this, but I think it's going to be a good addition to future dynasties, so I'm really excited about getting into it. So we're going to start off with our season. We're going to go through game by game just really quickly and just get an overview of kind of what happened throughout the season. And the biggest thing I've noticed out of the gate, we took on Cal first game of the season. We won by 21. Then you go to the next one against Kansas State. We won by 21 there. Idaho, our first conference game, that was a drubbing. And then Boise State, we beat them by 16, which I think is the smallest point differential throughout the entire season. It went that well for us. Oh, then we beat Louisiana Tech badly. New Mexico State was a drubbing, and then San Jose State had no issues there. Fresno State, that was one of our bigger games of the season, just in terms of getting a monkey off of our back, beating them handedly. Nevada, no issues there. Then everything, Utah State, you're starting to see a pattern with a lot of these. We beat Clemson badly. They had a really bad season in general. Florida came up here the end of the regular season, blasted them out of the water, and then we took on Ohio State in the national championship game, and as you could tell, we had no issues there as well. So just an amazing season for us. But what we can do now is go to Sports Illustrated and look at some things. Let's start off with the top 25 polls. I wish I could go back to previous weeks and see who started and who finished it. Maybe I can start looking at that in the preseason video type thing. But for now, we're going to see, we finished, number one in the country, of course, and Colorado. I would have loved to take them on. We'll probably schedule them in the next season. NC State, Iowa, Ohio State, Tennessee. Then you got Texas, Oklahoma, Tech, and then Miami, Florida State, and Michigan. Virginia, LSU. I'm not looking at really anything else harder other than the teams, but Kansas State, Arizona State, Virginia Tech, Florida finished 7-5. They got beat in their bowl games. So they ended up having a really bad year, but even though they came off of a national championship last season. Then you look at USC, South Carolina, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Minnesota, and Arizona, and then Wisconsin finished off the top 25. And of course, we got the media poll and the coaches poll. We just looked at the coaches poll. There's not going to be a whole lot of difference there, so I'm not going to really look at the media poll. Let's look at the Heisman. Of course, we know what the results are with this one. Troy Petty finished the season with that trophy. Grant was right behind him, had an amazing season. Then he got the quarterback out of Texas Tech, and then a pair of LSU players, Ryan Perrilloux and... No, this is NC State. I'm sorry. NC State player out of halfback, Tony Baker, appeared to have a really good season. Let's look at the award winners. We won a bunch of these. Maxwell Award, Petty got that one. Then the McNarick Award, LeFew got that one. Just had an incredible season. Ended up with 12 total touchdown interceptions. Of course, a lot of those were from me. Then quarterback, Petty won it. The Walker Award looks like the NC State halfback got that trophy. Then you look at the wide receiver award. Grant won it, of course. Glover almost finished in the top 3. I was wanting to look and see if anybody else from our team got finished in the top 12. Tight end, looks like a tight end out of Texas won that one. Good for this little kid out of Miami of Ohio. 5'11", 246, but he ended up having just a really good season, so good for him. Offensive line, this is the kid we went up against in a championship game. Didn't have too hard issues against him. It just kind of depends. I don't remember getting a ton of sacks trying to beat him, but he won that award. Then the Remington, West Virginia center, got it. Then you have the Lombardi Award, went to Morales, another kid out of West Virginia. Best linebacker, of course, LaFew won it. The Thorpe Award, we ended up having a couple of guys get close. Moss, Murphy, Oliver was on the list as well. But looks like a kid from Purdue won that one. And forgive me if I'm not, saying anything about their stats or anything. I'm not paying too much attention to it. But the Groves Award went to a kicker out of Miami. The best punter, Ohio State punter. I don't remember him just doing a lot of crazy things against us. He did have to punt a lot in our game. Returner, kid out of Auburn, won that one. Coach of the Year, we ended up not getting that one. I couldn't remember if I won it or not. We won so many awards this year. But looks like the NC State coach got that one. Let's look at the All-American and All-Conference list. All-Americans. We're going to look at the All-Americans, the freshmen, then we're going to look at our conference. We can look at the other ones, I guess, but I'm not way too interested in those. But looks like Petty and Grant are first-teamers. We can keep on scrolling down, see who else made the list. Looks like a handful of Tennessee players did. Of course, LaFew made that list. Good for Murphy. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, he had a really good season, don't get me wrong. But it's good to see him on there. 34 tackles, 5 interceptions, 2 touchdowns. Not bad for a true sophomore. That is the first team All-American list. We can look at the second team. We may have a few people on here. I'm trying to think who that would be. We may only have first teamers, which isn't a bad thing. So it looks like we had nothing but first teamers. Then we can look at the all-freshman team. Of course, Troy Petty won that. Got on that list. Glover made the list. Just looking, Matt Neal, redshirt freshman, made the list. Good to see that. He got hurt towards the end of the season. And that is it for the freshman team. We can look at the all-conference. Again, I really don't want to go through the other conferences because we just don't. There's so many players to keep up with. It's just hard to keep up with them all, more or less. So we'll just do our conference for now. Petty and Scruggs, and then Grant, Best made that, then McCray and Newsom, Skinner, Kemp. Pretty much our entire offensive line made first team. Neal made defensive end, on the first team. Then you got LaFew and Murphy and Moss, Oliver, then Jackson, our punter. You look at the second team, Glover made the second team list, and there's Latuli, another offensive lineman. Jasmine made second team all conference. Outside linebacker, Elamimian made the second team as well. Barry made the second team all conference. So good to see all of that. So what we can look at now is the bowl results. Just quickly going through here, looks like North Texas beat Louisiana Lafayette, Florida State over Nebraska. They got Central Michigan beat Marshall. I can't tell if any of these are upsets or not. But Colorado State over Northern Illinois. Then you got Oklahoma State over Bowling Green. San Diego State over Arkansas State. Fresno State over UCF. New Mexico State beat Boston College. Then you have, make sure I didn't miss one. No, Penn State over Toledo. South Carolina over A&M. Pittsburgh over Western Michigan. Texas over Minnesota. Then you got Virginia Tech over Rutgers. Kansas State over San Jose State. Louisville over Utah. Texas Tech over Arizona. Then you have Wisconsin over Auburn. Arizona State over Purdue. New Mexico over UTEP. Virginia over Georgia. Then we have Michigan over Arkansas. Oklahoma over Florida. Notre Dame over Maryland. Iowa over LSU. Then we have Tennessee beating West Virginia. Colorado beat USC. NC State beat Miami. And, of course, we beat the Mighty Buckeyes. Let's go. We can look at Players of the Week. I actually think this is... Oh, okay. So it's Bowl Week, Bowl Week, Bowl Week, and Bowl Week. So this isn't too important, to be honest. But we can look at... Of course, Troy Petty won the Bowl Week for, I guess, the week that we played. Good to see him do that. And it looks like defensive tackle out of Pitt done his thing. So let's go look at some final standings. I don't mind going through conference by conference on this one. This one won't take super long. We start off with our conference. We ended up winning it pretty handily by 2 full games. Then we can go to the ACC. I can do it by divisions. That's fine. Then you got NC State won The ACC, they were, of course, #1 in the Atlantic, with Miami winning the Coastal. You look at the Big Ten, of course, Ohio State won that one pretty handily by a full 2 games. You look at the Big 12, Colorado. That was a pretty tight race. Look at this conference: 8-1, 6-2, 6-3, 5-3, 5-3, 5-3, 4-4. Then we're starting to get some teams that are losing. That's pretty strong for that conference, having that many decent teams. Then you got the North Division. Of course, Colorado won that one, but it's the South that looked like they had a little bit better division. Oklahoma winning it. You look at the Big East, West Virginia won that one, but not by much. It looks like it was a pretty tight race up top. So that looked like that'd be a pretty entertaining season for that conference. Look at the Conference USA. UTEP over, I guess UTEP won it. Yeah, they have to, there's no such thing as a tiebreaker, or a tie, I should say, in this game. You look at the East, Marshall won the East, and then the West of the Conference USA, UTEP won that one easily. The rest of these teams done just absolutely awful. Of course, there's some things you can look at over this side, but I don't think that's that important. We can keep going. The Independents, of course, Notre Dame had a decent season, then the other teams not so much. You look at the MAC, Toledo ended up winning by 1 conference game, which I find interesting. That must be the championship game. They do have a conference title game. That's how they finished up 7-2, I guess. You look at the East, Kent State won that one, and then, of course, Toledo won the West. You look at the Mountain West, New Mexico won that one by 1 game over San Diego State. You look at the Pac-10, USC won it, but it's not the best conference in the world, so we wouldn't, I mean, it'd be a tougher road to try to win more titles if we were in the Pac-10. Unfortunately, we didn't get invited, even though some of these teams need to go down a peg or two. So there you go. Oregon State is now a 2-star program. So is Washington State, and so is Washington. So maybe we'll get lucky next season. I don't know. You look at the SEC. Tennessee won it over LSU. I'm assuming LSU was the other team they faced, because you look at the East, Tennessee won that big time by 2 full games. Then you look at the West, LSU, yes, did in fact win that division. Then you look at the Sun Belt. Louisiana Lafayette, looks like not much has changed now. Billy Napier won it again this season back in 2021. Then you have, of course, our conference, which we have already looked at. Archive covers, we won a bunch of, we made the cover of quite a few of these. I don't think it's super important to look at them all, but it's pretty cool to see that the more you win, the better chance you have of landing on one of these covers, as you see right here. Now the next thing I want to do is look at the stat book. So where we can start is looking at our team specifically, because where we're in season stats. And let's look at our passing. Now, QB rating wise, they have Marcellus technically with a higher QB rating. But what we want to look at is, you know, of course, Petty with completions and a TMC had a whole lot more of the bunch. But you look at the yards, 4,600 yards, just incredible. 48 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 355 yards a game. That's incredible. Of course, our completions were really good, but we kept a lot of our completions very simple. Just out routes and go routes. Those aren't super hard to complete. You look at his average, 12 yards per completion. The longest one he had was 82 yards. I'm trying to think of which play that was. He had 8 sacks, but that's not that big of a deal. But that's about as good of a passing stat that I can think of for a quarterback. Let's look at leading rushers. This isn't going to show a whole lot, but Petty ended up with almost 500 yards rushing. Scruggs 363, Larson 234, and Cox had 154. You look at, by attempts, actually, yeah, Petty had the most attempts. You look at the averages, all pretty strong, very efficient in our run game. We really try to pick our spots in that area. You look at the amount of touchdowns. Of course, Scruggs had 17 total. Now, one thing I can do, I'm not going to, I can go back and look at career-wise, but I don't really want to do that. We don't have enough time for it. But we can look at who had the longest, rush, which was apparently Scruggs. You look at the yards per game. Of course, this isn't a whole lot to see here because we throw the ball so much. You look at yards after first hit, 78 for Scruggs, 75. None of this means a whole lot to me at the moment, but it's cool to see Petty have 20-plus yard runs. A lot of those were off that speed option type stuff. Then you got broken tackles. Looks like Cox won that one. Then fumbles. Looks like we had a handful of fumbles. Larson and Glover had 2 each. Of course, that's a wide receiver, which is pretty interesting. So now what we can do, I don't really want to scroll down here because look at the bottom 4 or 5. Let's just go to receiving. Who led in receptions? Technically, it was Larson, which I find just really odd because we're technically running the run and shoot, but it kind of converted into a little bit of an air raid because we really want to get the ball out as quickly as possible. And a lot of these or pass plays have a halfback as like a default man beater or zone beater, but he won it by 1 reception over Grant. But it was really close. Look at Glover with 68 receptions. Then you got Davis with 66. So that is some pretty tight stuff right there. I was not expecting it to be that evenly distributed, but it was. That's pretty cool to see. You look at, we can scroll down some more, but again, there's just not much to look at there. Then you look at the yards. Grant with almost 1,700 yards. Then Glover had 1,100. Davis with over 800. Larson had a really good season. Rackley picked his spots because if you look at the average, Grant had the highest average, which makes sense. We threw a lot of deep balls, but we also done the same thing with Rackley. But look at these other averages. Fritz done well, Glover and Davis. Just a lot of guys over 12 plus yards. Total touchdowns, 22 for one wide receiver is quite a bit. Glover had 11, then 6 and 6 for Rackley and Larson. The big 5 guys who catch the ball stay pretty consistent throughout the year. Who had the longest one? Looks like it was Grant. I'm guessing it was a deep ball of some sort. Davis had one of 80 yards. Good to see that. So a lot of big chunk plays, to say the least. You look at yards per game, 129 for Grant. Glover with 87 and 64 for Davis. Larson for 48. Rackley had 38. You look at RAC. Is that receptions? I don't know what that is. Run after catch? Either way. Receiving yards after catch? Is that yak yards? Is that what that is? Either way. Larson had 622. Grant 392. And so on and so forth. Then we can look at the average for that. Larson done a really good job with it. I need to find out what that is. I don't know what that is. Rack. I've never heard of that. Who knows what that is? Either way, it's cool to say drops. Now, this is going to surprise some people. Look at this. Grant had 12 total drops on the season. Glover with 11. So that's like 1 a game for a couple of these guys. Then we can go to blocking. This ain't going to show a whole lot because we didn't run the ball enough. McCray had the most pancakes of the bunch. And you look at sacks allowed. It was pretty evenly distributed among all of the offensive linemen. Then we can look at the defensive side. LeFew is our leading tackler with 53 total tackles. Then Doherty and Murphy, Neal, and Lememian, so on and so forth. Then you look at the tackles for loss. Jasmine won that one, but not by much. Lememian had 11. Neal and LeFew had 10 each. Then you look at the sacks. Jasmine with 10. Lememian with 8. And 5, 5, 4 with a few other guys. Just a lot of sacks that we was able to generate. Then you got interceptions. LeFew just had an astronomical number. Then Murphy, Moss, Doherty, and Oliver done their share in the backfield as well. Not in the backfield, but in the secondary. Then you got interception yards. So LeFew had 161. That's a really big number. Of course, you got to have multiple interceptions to kind of get those type of numbers. But it's cool to see that along with Moss and Murphy. Then you look at the interception average just in terms of yards per interception. LeFew won that one. Then interception, the longest one apparently was LeFew. Then we had a couple guys with 29 each. Pass deflections was LeFew. I guess that's me doing a lot of that. Again, I talked a little bit about that earlier today in a little community post where I mentioned about some things I may change up. But it's cool to see LeFew just run away with that one. Forced fumbles, LeFew and Oliver. What's the big key here? Both of them are impact players. So that's something to think about. Then you got fumble recoveries. Murphy led that one, but a few other guys had 1 each. Fumble yards. I guess that's yards after the fumble. Murphy had 23. Blocks. We didn't have anybody block anything, which kind of makes sense. We didn't have any safeties either. And defensive touchdowns. Murphy had 2 and LeFew had 1. Kicking. Not going to be a whole lot to see here. Devin Jackson went 6 for 6, though. Pretty good. Long of 41. A ton of extra points. 88 extra point attempts. That's insane. But a 98 percentage, you know, it's pretty good. The rest of that, let's see. 3 of them were pretty short. 3 more, they were, oh, those are attempts. I see what you're seeing here. But pretty normal. We don't kick a whole lot. That's a good thing. We're usually scoring more touchdowns, but now at least you get to see it. You look at the punting, there's not going to be a whole lot to see here. Only 12 total punts, so we averaged 1 punt a game. Less than that, actually. 556 yards. His average was good, 46.3. His longest was 56. He was able to give 4 of them inside the 20. Looking at some of these other ones, a punt touchback, 5 of them. And let's look at some kick returns. 14 by Bass, 13 by Glover. You look at the yardage, Bass ended up having more than Glover did. You look at the averages, Bass won that one as well. He also had the longest of 103 yards. That must have been a touchdown. And he's the only one who actually had touchdowns off the kick return. You look at the punt return, we only had Glover. He had 22 of them, 328 yards, almost 15 yards per average. His longest was 74 yards, and he ended up getting 1 touchdown. Okay, let's look at everybody. Let's go to, really quickly, we'll go to NCAA. We'll look at the all-time, just for this season, across the board. So, looks like Colorado's quarterback won the QB rating. I'm not going to say the award, but he won that stat. Then you look at the completions. Looks like Petty's going to be in the top 5 for a lot of these. Looks like Morris, the New Mexico State kid, had a bunch of those. But you look at some of these other ones. I was just curious. Petty won. We got in the top 5. The amount of attempts. I was curious to see who else may be on here. Yards. I'm not going to go beyond the top 5. We don't have enough time for it. But yards, looks like Petty finished 3rd in that. Morris, New Mexico State kid, got 1st. And, of course, Texas Tech. That's going to be pretty normal in 06. New Mexico State and Texas Tech are going to put up the most amount of yards because they throw the ball more than everybody else. Total touchdowns. And make sure I've done this correctly. Yeah, and I did. Touchdowns. Davis, the Texas Tech quarterback, won that one by 6 full touchdowns. Petty ended up with 48. But again, just being in the top 5 in that category is pretty cool. Who won the most interceptions? Who got that one? Morris. That's what happens when you throw a lot. You're going to throw a lot of interceptions along the way. Thankfully, Petty is nowhere near to this. He ended up having 10 total interceptions. Then he got yards per game. Morris with 423, then Davis 363. But there's Petty with 354.8. So he did get in the top 5 there. A lot of completion percentages. Pretty high for quite a few of these guys. We're in here somewhere. We're in the 70s. We're 72. So we made the top 10. Pretty close. Then you look at the averages. We're in the top 3 there. That's pretty cool to see. Longest one. We had quite a few long passing touchdowns this season. You got the sacks. This is good. Least amount of sacks was for us. So I do a pretty good, decent job of not trying to get sacked if I can help it. Then we can look at rushing. I am not going to go do conference by conference. We'll do the WAC. I don't mind looking at that, but we're not going to do every single conference. But let's look at the leading rushers. In terms of attempts, Jermaine James out of Tennessee had by far the most. In terms of yardage, Jermaine James won that by almost over 200 yards. We're not going to have anybody in the top 5. Let's just put it that way. Look at the averages. We may have an average that's pretty decent, but I thought we would have somebody here, but maybe they took us off. It may be like a minimum of a certain amount of attempts in order to make this list. You look at the touchdowns. Scruggs got the most amount of touchdowns. Of course, there's just a lot of goal line stuff there. The longest runs, it looks like Ryan Perlew had a 92-yard rushing touchdown, or at least, no, that's a rushing attempt, I should say. Yards per game. See, this is the thing that kind of bugged me a little bit about Ohio State. They had the leading rusher in terms of yards per game, and he didn't run the ball hardly at all, and that was because they had an impact quarterback where the coach felt like we needed to throw the ball more. Well, that was a mistake. You look at after first hit, Jermaine James, the more you run the ball, the better chance you're going to have this stat go up pretty high. 20-plus yard runs. Looks like Petty had 6 of them, which is pretty incredible for a quarterback because the rest of these are, of course, halfbacks. Broken tackles. Jermaine James, this kid must be an absolute stud. Just doing a little bit of everything for him on the ground. You look at fumbles. Wow, look at this kid. A lot of quarterbacks, but look at that. 17 fumbles by one quarterback. Ew. A lot of these are going to be quarterbacks, I would imagine. Then you look at, that is it for rushing. Let's go to the receiving. Leading reception leader, and that is Daryl Mitchell. Again, New Mexico State. That makes sense. And look at here, a Texas Tech wide receiver. Go figure. We may be down here a little bit. We're probably not too far off. I could be dead wrong. I guess we're pretty far off from that. We had a lot of guys get evenly distributed receptions, I would imagine. You look at the yards, though. Grant, second in the country in yards. We may have Glover down here a little bit ways. I think he had 1,100 and something. You look at the average. Grant won that one by a country mile. Then you got touchdowns. Grant won that one. You look at the longest. Just a handful of guys here. Doesn't mean a whole lot to me. You look at the yards per game. Grant finished third in that one in the yards per game. Then you look at, again, the rack. I don't know what the receptions after are after. Is that run after the catch? I'm thinking this is yards after catch. I could be dead wrong, though. But Daryl Mitchell, this kid is kind of doing a little bit of everything for him. Through the air, receiving the ball. The average looks pretty high. Drops. Who had the most drops? Now, here's what you got to think about. Look at this right here. So, as much as we throw, look, we are leading in the top three. Grant, Glover, and Davis had the most amount of drops of anybody in the entire country, which I just find interesting. I have no desire to increase our catch rating, though. That's not an issue to me, but I've always thought it was just kind of funny seeing these three being in the top spot there. We can keep going and look at the next one, which is the blocking. This isn't going to show a whole lot for us personally, but 50 pancakes for one guy is pretty good. Sacks allowed. Ooh. I guess if you throw enough, you're going to have some guys on here, but their leading stat leader for that one was a center out of Texas Tech, no less. Defensively, look at this kid. Got 112 tackles, and he's a true freshman. Out of Bowling Green, look at tackles for loss. Derek Morales, he won the Lombardi Award, so good for him. Then you got the sack leaders. Morales, he got both in tackles for loss and in sacks. That's impressive. 6'4", 300-pounder. They run a 3-3-5 defense there. Most amount of interceptions. LeFew won that one by a wide margin. Of course, like I said, a lot of that was me, more or less. Interception yards. He had that one sealed and delivered. You look at the interception average. Of course, this is a bit of a discrepancy. It all depends on kind of where you're at on the field and how many yards you can get beyond that. Interception long, 85 there. Look, pass deflections. LeFew had a huge margin over everybody else. Again, that's me controlling him. Forced fumbles. Pretty even distribution. The highest was 5, and there's quite a few of them with that honor. You look at the fumble recoveries. More or less the same thing. Fumble yards. Then you look at the blocks. We had a couple different guys get 2 blocks, I guess, off of kicks and punts, I should say. Then you got safeties. Nobody had more than 1 on the year. Defensive touchdowns. Cool to see Murphy on that one, but it just shows it's very hard to get a defensive touchdown in this game. Next up, we can quickly go look at kicking. Looks like Colorado State kid led that one. Attempts, same thing. Percentages, cool to see Jackson on there. Field goal long. Quite a few guys were able to get 55 yards and plus on that. Field goal blocks, quite a few there that got blocked. And they got extra points made. Of course, Jackson destroyed that stat along with the attempts. Then you got percentage. A lot of guys with 100% there. Percentage block doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Field goals made, these are the short range. I'm just looking to see if any of our guys made the top 5. Again, I don't want to go through the top 10 through 20. We just don't have enough time for it. It's crazy how much stats this game keeps up with. Pretty cool. We never had any chance to kick any 50-plus yarders. If that was the case, I probably wouldn't be kicking a field goal. But Jackson looks like in terms of kickoffs, we had the most of 93. And he had the most touchbacks, which makes sense because he's got quite the leg. You look at punting. Leader in punters. Again, we're getting in some knee-deep stat stuff right now. Then you go to yards. Just looking to see if anybody, if Jackson made any of these. Look at that 91-yard punt. Gee whiz. Then you got an inside the 20. Net yards. Then you got net average. Punt, touchbacks. Then punt, blocks, punts. And that is it for punting. We've probably got some return stuff here. In terms of total returns, that doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. We can look at yards. Averages, those are pretty strong numbers there. Bess had the longest of everybody in the country at 103. And he also led in touchdowns, which I find interesting. Nobody else in the country had more than 2. Huh. We can look at punt returns. Looks like LSU forced a lot of punts. Yardage. Kid out of North Texas won that one. Average. Kid out of Nebraska. Then you got the longest. Same kid. Then you got touchdowns. Nobody did a whole lot on the punt returns this season, apparently. Okay, let's go look at the WAC really quick. I don't mind doing that. We go here, and I'm not going to do page by page. We're just going to look at the main stuff here. It was pretty obvious that Petty was the lead best passer in our conference. Rushing, looks like the Fresno State kid had the best season of the bunch. Receiving, the New Mexico State wide receiver done his thing. 1,750 yards. That's pretty impressive. Blocking doesn't say a whole lot to me there, especially sacks allowed. That was that New Mexico State kid. Again, makes sense. The more you throw, the more you're probably going to give up on the sacks. Defensively, Louisiana Tech outside linebacker with 84 tackles. Just look at some of these other ones. Who led in sacks? Jasmine led in sacks there. Interceptions, LeFew got that one. And again, I'm not going to go through the rest of those. I don't think anybody really cares. The same with kicking. Nothing special there. Jackson was arguably the best punter in our conference. Just looking at returns, nothing very special here. So I think we are good to go ahead and look at career stats. I'm not going to pay attention to this. There's just too much to look at. But we can look at team stats. I find this pretty interesting. Let's look at some total yardage. We were 4th in the country, total yards. Offensive yards, we were number 1 in the country there. Texas Tech, Texas. Fresno State was 4th in the country there. Pretty cool. Wasn't expecting that. You got passing yardage. Of course, we were in the top 5. You look at rushing yardage. We were nowhere near close. And look at this. Again, Ohio State had the number 1 rushing attack in the country, and they just decided not to run the ball. Makes no sense. That's why they got beat by 40 points. We can keep going. Points per game, 48.6. We won that one by a full touchdown over everybody else. Passing touchdowns, Texas Tech had 10 more than we did. Rushing touchdowns, we actually led the country in rushing touchdowns, which makes no sense. But when we get to the goal line, we try to keep it simple and just go in for, a touchdown. You got first downs. We look here. Oh, make sure I've done this one correctly. Yeah, we did. We go to the first downs, and we were 2nd in the country on that one. Sacks allowed, we were number 1 in the country there. That's good. Then we can look at the defense. If I can get over to the far end, if it'll let me. Then we go to total yardage. Who had the number 1 defense? We did. When you're dealing with 5-minute quarters, I don't know if that's kind of skewed or not, but, we're pretty close to the number 2, which is Navy. They were like only, 60 yards off from us. So that's not a big discrepancy. If this was like 2,400 yards, then that would be kind of concerning. But I guess that looks pretty normal. You look at yards given up. I want to look at, looks like Florida had the best passing defense in the country. Rushing yards given up. Looks like Arkansas. No, I've done the wrong one. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've done that correctly. We'll look at the rushing yards given up. Rice led in that one. We were in 2nd place there. Points per game. We had, I guess, the best defense in the country to go along with the rest of our amazing stats. Total amount of sacks. Tennessee had the most amount of sacks in the season with 56. Then you got interceptions. Who had the most amount of interceptions? So looks like we did. I guess that makes sense with LeFew. Then you got fumble recovery. San Diego State had a great season there. And we can check out efficiency. I don't know if this is super important. I don't know. I don't think this matters a whole lot. But third down conversions, I'm not too worried about that. I want to look at percentages. Yeah, we won by a full 6% on that one. And again, look at that. Ohio State had an amazing season up until they played us. You got fourth down conversions. I want to look at the percentage. Yeah, Texas Tech, 6 for 6. I wonder how many attempts. I felt like we had a handful of attempts. Maybe we didn't. Who knows? We can keep going. This other stuff, I really don't care. I mean, if you guys want to look at it, I can do that in another video down the road in another season. 2-point conversions. Again, this is like knee-deep stat stuff. That doesn't mean a whole lot to me, but you look at the amount of penalty yardage. No, those are amount of penalties in general. That was just a big discrepancy there. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with the amount of minutes we play in a game. Penalty yards, looks like we were in the middle of the pack there. Turnovers. New Mexico State threw a lot of interceptions, a lot of fumbles lost. Looks like Arizona. Giveaways. You look like U.S. South Florida. Then you got interceptions. We won that one. Fumble recovery. San Diego State done their part there. Takeaways. We were third in the country in takeaways. Turnover differential. We were number 1 in that department there. If you are in the top 10, 15 in that area, you're going to win a lot of ball games. And that is it for the team stuff. I think there's like an efficiency. I can quickly go to the WAC really quick. No, I'm not going to bother. Nobody really cares. Stat rankings. I don't mind looking at this. I think this is pretty neat. NCAA rankings for offense. 6th, 1st, 3rd, 87th in rushing. That makes a lot of sense, but a lot of top 10, a lot of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd type stats there. And of course, our conference ranking is pretty stout to go with it. Needless to say, our offense done its job. Then you go to defense. 1st, 2nd, 8th. You got 100th on fumbles recovered, but our defense definitely done their job. You can also look at... You can only look at by team. I guess you can't look at overall. But either way, we've done a good job on both sides of the ball. Unless there is a special team. We got some efficiency things. Let's look at the efficiency. Looks like 3rd down. We didn't do a very good job on the efficiency. We're dead last in attempts, which is a good thing, I guess. Then you got 1st in percentage. Some of the stuff we already looked at. This may be an easier thing to look at than what we saw before. Kind of, sort of. But either way, there's some efficiency stuff there. Turnovers. 1st in interceptions. Again, some of this we've already seen. Turnover differential. Average turnover differential. And there is the rankings. The last thing I want to look at is our roster. Who progressed? All of that good stuff. Let's start off with quarterback. Oh, it's not going to show the progression. Dang it. I thought it was going to show that. I guess I need to show that before the last game, because I could have swore it would show the progression. Dang it, it's not going to show that. Well, there's no point of us looking at this, because I'm going to look at this at the beginning of the off-season video. So that is it for the little the season recap. Hopefully you got something out of it. I don't know. I think it's a nice little addition. I can fine-tune it for later seasons. But anyway, at least you got to see a nice little recap of the season as a whole. So our next Dynasty video is going to be the off-season stuff. That should be a whole lot of fun. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later.